Hi, everyone, and welcome to The X, a podcast from inside Silicon Valley about how experience shapes everything, from products to businesses to entire industries. I'm Brian McLean, and I'm here with Demetrius Madrigal. Today, we're going to talk about space tourism. Demetrius doesn't find it that interesting, but we'll discuss why that is and why I think this might work as a funding source for the future of long-distance travel. Good morning, Dee. What do you think? You want to buy a few tickets to space and do our podcast up there?
No, not at all, actually.
It could be fun.
There's a lot of things that can be fun. And we'll talk about why I'm skeptical about all of this. When you brought it up, I was like, I don't know if I want to do that just because I don't really want to be the negative guy. But when you start digging into what this is and ultimately what the cost is and what the experience is around it, and it's just like this stuff just doesn't line up. And we'll get into that, but I'll let you kind of start off with a bit of an overview.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually think I heard that Tom Cruise is thinking about shooting a movie in space, and he's going to partner with Elon Musk, and they're going to send him to space to shoot some of the segments up there.
Yeah, it's great for headlines.
Yeah, I know. I was like, wow, that's a risky one. He'd be the first actor, I think, to go to space and film a movie up there. But
well, I mean, Tom Cruise is a huge. He's honestly, Tom Cruise gets flack for being mostly a box office draw more than an actor, but he has great. He tends to make good movies. He tends to be in good movies. Not, we kind of poo-pooed The Mummy the other day because he's not batting 1,000, but most of his movies are pretty enjoyable.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And he's a real thrill seeker, if you know anything about him. Like, he likes to do his own stunts, like Mission Impossible 2, like stab me in the eye with a knife kind of stuff. So it doesn't surprise me that he wants to do something that might not be the most safe.
Well, I can tell you, I would definitely be super stoked about watching a movie where I knew that it was actually filmed in space. I mean, that's just crazy. But we'll see if it actually happens. Honestly, like it might be too risky, right?
I don't think it makes any difference for me personally. The ability to kind of mock it up and make it look good, I think is great. Like if you saw Gravity, like I think they're going to come back and they're going to be like Steven Spielberg was after making Jaws. You're just like never again.
Actually, I just saw Stowaway. Have you seen that one yet?
I don't think I've seen that one.
It's Anna Kendrick, and they're heading to Mars, and it was funny because I was telling my wife, I was like, hey, I'm going to go watch this movie Stowaway. And she's like, you always come in so depressed after watching these movies. I said, yeah, because the ending is never good going to Mars. It's always somebody starves to death or doesn't have any oxygen.
Whenever I talk to somebody about like what it's really like, because we did the NASA time and most of our stuff was on aviation, but we had some experience with some of the space stuff.
Yeah.
Whenever I talk to somebody about like space travel, I tell them, go watch Approaching the Unknown. Because that's probably
so good.
That is probably, aside from the radiation destroying your DNA, that is probably going to be the most realistic depiction of what space travel, especially to Mars, would feel like.
Yeah, after I saw that movie, I was like, this is exactly what it would feel like to head to Mars. Yeah. Right? It was a really good. If anyone out there who hasn't seen this movie, you should really go watch this movie.
Mm-hmm.
But let's talk about space tourism. Very interesting topic. It's kind of booming, the news around it this year. I did a bunch of research on it, and honestly, CNBC, I think, did the best segment. It's on YouTube, type space tourism CNBC. I pulled a lot of information from that, including their kind of breakdown of like this survey that was conducted in 2020, showing that like there's a lot of interest with people with high net worths over $5 million or more, interested in paying, $250,000 to visit space. But let's kind of break it down a little bit so everyone kind of understands like who's doing this and what are their goals. So there are basically 5 companies, but 3 that are the main ones. So you have SpaceX, Blue Origin, Virgin Galactic, Axiom Space, and then Boeing. For Axiom Space and Boeing, they're also doing a lot of other things, astronaut training, that kind of stuff. So I don't know that it's like a full-on space tourism company, but Virgin Galactic in particular is. So the way this is kind of broken down is it's into orbital and suborbital. So what this means is that are these companies giving you the experience of orbiting around Earth or visiting the International Space Station? Or is it a suborbital experience where they basically take you up to the edge of space, which is approximately 80 to 100,000 to 100 kilometers, and then back down? So you kind of like come up, you float for a little bit, you get to see the world from a distance, and then you work your way back down to Earth. And it's this quick but pretty crazy experience, it looks like. And that's kind of what most of them seem to be focusing on. So if you look at Virgin Galactic, an entertainment company, okay, I shouldn't say that. So their focus is on space tourism, and it will be for quite some time. And then eventually, the longer term goal is to have different partners and then try to do high speed, long distance travel. When I say entertainment, I mean, as a primary company for space tourism, they're basically trying to entertain people who have high net worths at the end of the day. But their job is to start with suborbital experiences. They have this really cool airplane that takes off, flies up to space, goes weightless for a little bit, and then glides all the way back down to Earth. So I think you get roughly around 7 minutes
Mm.
in space, and you get to feel that kind of experience of what it's like to be an astronaut. They're also looking into doing private astronaut recruitment and training. So they established a partnership with NASA to help train people up and get them prepped to visit the International Space Station. So a lot of these companies are doing these government contracts with companies like NASA in order to increase their funding for the company, while also contributing back to the industry as a whole. The next one is Blue Origin, which is the one that's owned and run by Jeff Bezos, the founder and chairman of Amazon. The short-term goal is suborbital space tourism at a competitive price to basically help fund their larger rocket and space system development, such as Blue Moon. So they are really going after these big government contracts of building technology to help put us on the moon. Their actual rocket is different. So Virgin Galactic's is like an airplane, and it flies up and then it exits and then it slides back down. This one is like a rocket that takes you into space, and then the front of the capsule breaks off. You float around a little bit. It flies back to Earth, parachutes deploy, and then you land on the ground or in the water. Their longer term goal is basically building space colonies where you can go and live as our Earth struggles with the growth of population and global warming issues and that kind of stuff. So, how do you take a percentage of our population and actually have them go live in space? So, any thoughts about this? I hear you over there. Kind of, I can hear your voice. I can
Number
feel
one,
it.
the capsule breaking off and parachutes deploying and flooding back to Earth. I've seen that movie before. It doesn't necessarily. I wasn't thinking to myself, "Oh, I wish I was there with Tom Hanks." Yeah, I don't know. So we'll see how it works out. But like, you add the fact that it's basically kind of this rich person luxury thrill seeking experience. So you have to have very wealthy thrill seekers, which exist, right? So it makes sense that like Richard Branson would be associated with something like this.
Yeah.
But on top of it, it's just extremely expensive. It's not very safe. They're going to have a lot of luxury trappings of it, but at the same time, you're going to get knocked around a lot.
Yeah. If you look at the actual design of some of these ships, I mean, they're beautiful inside.
Yeah.
And they look very comfortable. It doesn't look like your traditional, spacecraft from the from the 70s, right?
Yeah.
These look like luxury airplanes inside. But I haven't even got to the last one yet, which I know I'm going to hear some giggles on your side because I know you have strong opinions about this because it's so dangerous.
Let's do it, and then we'll get into the reactions.
Okay, so the last one is SpaceX, so Elon Musk's company, and everyone obviously knows Elon Musk. So his is going to be an orbital flight for 5 days, orbiting around Earth. They take you up, and then they put you in orbit, and then you float around Earth for basically 5 days, and you get a real full experience doing that. It takes about 2 weeks of training with the 5 days, and then once your capsule is done and it starts to head back to Earth, then it deploys parachutes and it splashes into the ocean and you get picked up. Um, sorry. And then the other part of it is tourism to the International Space Station, which they're actually claiming is going to happen at the end of this year or next year, with the first person going to ISS. And that person is paying, I think, $50 million to go.
Yep, that's right.
Yep. And then most importantly, SpaceX's primary goal, right? I think this is kind of a funding source thing, but is they service NASA contracts to deliver cargo to the ISS. They're building reusable rockets, which is absolutely crazy and amazing. And then he believes that we should be a civilization that lives on other planets. So his primary goal is colonization of Mars
Okay.
eventually.
Let me start off by having a very positive reaction to
Okay.
everything I'm hearing, which is the fact that SpaceX was able to develop reusable rockets that were able to take off and land, and then I believe the Blue Origin has kind of caught up with that with competing technology.
Yeah, they're
The
doing that
fact that
too.
they're
Yeah.
able to do this stuff, that is amazing. That is great that they are picking up where public funding has kind of left off, and they're continuing to develop around space exploration because all of this stuff is absolutely necessary. We need to be able to explore space and to understand things that we don't currently understand. Because a lot of the scientific research that's done around this is based around certain assumptions about like the behavior of gravity, the behavior of light, that assuming that how gravity and behavior and light behaves on Earth is also how gravity and light behaves in distant star clusters with multiple stars within a single solar system. And we don't know that that's true. We don't know if gravity starts behaving differently once you have a very different setup than a single star system. So it's very important that we get to that point and start to understand it in order for us to understand just physics in general. The other part is this idea of anytime soon being able to inhabit Mars is it's just think about this, right? If you can, one of the major reasons why people are saying we need to be able to get off of Earth because of the shifting ecological landscape, right? So global warming, pollution, these kinds of things, right? So the idea is to go to Mars, where the environment is much more hostile than it is here, and then either building systems like biospheres or terraforming the planet so that it can be habitable. The reality is, if you could do that on Mars, it's going to be cheaper and easier to do that here, right? If you can terraform Mars, you can terraform the Earth and take care of these environmental issues that we're running into.
Mhm.
And the fact is, it's too expensive and it's too difficult, and the technology doesn't fully exist yet, which is why the idea of terraforming Mars or developing biospheres on Mars is just, it's not really anything that's going to happen anytime soon. What I think that they're interested in, all of them, is getting to Mars or getting to off-planet celestial bodies like meteorites, and being
Uh-huh.
able to strip mine them without an EPA or anybody trying telling them that they have to look out for the welfare of the planet. The reality is, you can do this with pretty much all drones. You can do this completely automated. You can land a bunch of automated systems onto Mars. You could start mining out very, very valuable, expensive mineral deposits that are used in electronics, for example, and you can bring them back to Earth, and there's no environmental impact on Earth. And this kind of libertarian fever dream where they're free from any kind of regulation, they can do all that off planet and nobody's around to stop them. And to be honest, there's not a whole lot of need to stop them other than the fact that Mars, if it is a tourist destination, if it does turn out to be life there, then that could be impacted. But at the same time, any kind of regulatory body is way too far away to be
Yeah.
able to have any impact on them.
No, I mean, that totally makes sense. I want to be clear why I was laughing the whole time as I was reading these, because I cannot see you. We're not on video right now, and I can
Uh-huh.
feel you on the other side as I'm saying this stuff. And also because you and I have met astronauts before, right? We understand that
Yes.
the amount of work and dedication that these amazing individuals have to going to space. I mean, they put themselves through a tremendous amount of physical and mental training. You know, they're extremely strong, extremely intelligent, right? And they do all this kind of stuff for all those like just in case scenarios that could happen when you're in space.
Mm-hmm.
So when I think about them setting up someone like me or you or anyone else who wants to pay the $250,000 price tag, my mind just runs to like all these possible issues of like orbiting for 5 days, and what happens if you feel sick, and is there, there's no doctor. They usually have a doctor on board, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
all these
Well, they're
scenarios,
going
like
to
I
have a doctor on board. And the
yeah,
other thing with orbital travel is that it's if somebody starts having a bad reaction,
yeah,
you can't always just land,
no, you can't.
right? You have to look for your orbital window in order to come down. So let me walk you through a little bit of the experience on this, right? So um, let's take a look at kind of cost and value. So the Virgin Galactic suborbital flight costs $250,000, and what value
Mm-hmm.
does it provide? The answer is it's like a whopping 6 or 7 minutes in space, right? So that's six
It's
or
a
seven
thrill,
minutes,
right?
and yeah, it's like a thrill ride, and they're hoping to get to high speed travel. So that's like being able to cross the planet in some ridiculously small amount of time. But it's 6 minutes in space, and if you talk to any astronauts who've had similar experiences with weightlessness on some of the training vehicles, they call these vehicles the vomit comet. Right? It's
Yeah,
not fun. It's like, oh, hey, for the low price of $250,000, we can transport you to a war zone and somebody can shoot at you, right? It's you're paying a lot of money for a short experience that's probably not going to be that much fun. That's why
yeah,
when you're mentioning like you can spend $50 million and you can splash down to the ocean. Splashing down in the ocean is not going to be a fun experience, right? I'll tell a very short story. When we finished up at NASA and we founded the company, one of the first contracts that we had was working with a defense contractor, and we weren't working on weapon systems. We steered clear of that. But one of the experiences that I had was going out to the desert in Southern California and riding around in tracked vehicles as part of some research. And we can't really talk about what the research was, but I'll tell you that riding in like a tracked vehicle, like a tank or like a Bradley, is very, very cool for about 20 minutes. And then after 20 minutes, it is very not cool. It is very like, all right, I see why this is something that's done for soldiers, not necessarily for fun.
mm-hmm.
Um, and that I think is what kind of a splashdown is going to be like. People are going to be sick. People are going to be worn out. It's not going to feel good. It's just a splashdown event just doesn't feel good, I don't think.
Yeah. I'll tell you what I'm really excited about, though. I know there's all the downfalls of that, and I think this is kind of for a better choice of words, kind of a stress test on the system, a test of the technology. But the idea that one day it would transition from this to long haul flights that are done. So basically exiting the orbit, exiting Earth briefly, and then coming back down and landing in another location. So like going from San Francisco to Japan in 60 minutes, right? Like that's crazy. And that
Mm-hmm.
would be amazing. And that would fundamentally change our world to be able to travel all around the world that quickly. And I think
Well,
if this is the beginning to get us there, that would be great.
that's awesome, but that's also what they said about the Concorde. And I look at this as kind of like a super Concorde. The
Yeah.
reality is it's only going to be available to the super rich. It's not going to speed up the distribution of goods because it can't happen at that scale. And at least not in the foreseeable future. Eventually it could be, but
Yeah.
we're just not there yet. And there's so many technological hurdles that still need to be overcome, right? Which is why if you're looking at like a couple decades down the line, you can absolutely see it. If it can replace like the 14 hours to get to Japan or China,
Oh yeah.
then that's great. But the reality is it's only going to be for people who can afford $100,000 for a flight. It's only going to
Yeah,
be
I
for
think the
the private
goal is
jet
to get
crowd.
it down to like the price of, like, if you had to take first class from here to like England or something, like that
Mm,
pricing, right? Try to get it down to like that, which is like, say it was like $10,000, right?
yeah,
And then you just keep trying to get lower and lower. But you were right. I mean, you and I talked about this before the podcast, and you kind of looked at the analysis of it and was like, yeah, this is gonna take a long time. Like to get it
yeah.
down to the point where the average person goes, oh, I'm gonna go hop on this flight and go to Japan for lunch. I mean, you're talking, could be decades, right? Before they figure that out.
Yeah, traveling kind of in that speed, and again, going with this is probably not going to feel that good to a whole lot of people. So I don't know that it's going to be like, oh, I'm going to go on a pleasure cruise to Japan for lunch because I'm going to lose my lunch on the way back.
Yeah.
Uh, so things that people aren't necessarily thinking about. The other fact is if we start thinking about kind of the environmental impact for some of these things, so like a rocket launch, for example, right? We've been talking a lot about suborbital, so just quickly getting into orbital. Number one, it's going to cost $50 million.
No. The person is the tourism. The person is paying $50 million
Yeah,
to be
okay.
trained and taken to ISS.
Yeah, so $50 million just for the flight, then $35,000 a day.
Yeah.
So that's only for the ultra rich, and then it has to be people who have the necessary levels of health too, because realistically, there's only been what 330 something people, 300 something people, Americans that have been in space. So,
Yeah.
and all of those people have been handpicked. They've been trained for months. It's a huge commitment, and there's a reason for that because space is inherently unhealthy. We know we're just finding out just in the last couple of years that the radiation, the stress, the weightlessness. We worked on like haptic feedback suits, right? That was one of the lab that I worked at NASA. One of their main focuses was on haptics. And they've developed these suits so that people can have some resistance while they're in space, so that their muscles don't all atrophy.
Yeah.
We've also just recently found out that extended time in space can alter your DNA. It can change the physiology of your eye. It can. We've seen people have like cognitive detriments lasting 6 months or longer. These are all things that this is mostly associated with like long term stuff, but we don't know what happens when we take people who might have some kind of that aren't in the perfect astronaut finely honed state of health and put
Hmm.
them into space. And then thinking about like the SpaceX one, where now you're orbiting the Earth for 5 days. So it's not like going on it's not like going to Tahiti or something. You're not going to go to the resort and they're going to have a great bar and you're going to be able to go out and sit at the pool and things like that. You're going to be locked up in a capsule for 5 days.
Yeah.
You can look out the window and that's about it. There's not much
Yeah.
else to do. You're going to be stuck in a capsule orbiting the Earth for 5 days. And if you decide, and if you get sick and it's not working well for you, you're having some health reactions, or you're just really bored, or you just didn't like it, then it's 5 days. You still got to wait 4 more days before you can exit the experience. And exiting the experience means splashing down in the ocean.
Yeah.
So you're like, go watch Lost, right? Like splashing down, and you're crashing into the ocean.
Yeah.
They
Well,
call
the
it
thing.
splashing down. You're crashing into the ocean. So
Yeah.
just keep that in mind. That's what that feels like. And you're spending millions of dollars to have this experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I fundamentally believe that if the way this is going to take off, I think Virgin Galactic probably has the lead on this, which is this suborbital experience. It's almost like skydiving or something, right? We're going to take
Mm-hmm.
you up somewhere. You know, skydiving, you jump out of an airplane. Some people don't feel sick. Some people feel sick on the way up on the airplane. They still have to jump out. They jump out, you know, and then they have certain feelings as they're going down, and then it's kind of over with. I feel like the whole taking the airplane up, you're up there for 6 or 7 minutes, they bring you back down is probably it. That's probably the best case scenario for doing this. And I think there's a lot of people that would love to do it, love to try it. The
Mm-hmm.
hard part about this really is even if they dial in all the technology and everything's squared away and the FAA has looked at it and said, okay, you met all the criteria because you do have to meet Federal Aviation Administration safety requirements and they have to
Mm-hmm.
get through all those phases. I think there's 3 phases of it prior to allowing the first group of people to go up. Is if this goes bad at all, just one time, I mean, it could really tank the industry for decades, right? Like
Well,
it's
yeah.
a risky endeavor to do this, even though it looks super cool. I mean, just look at it and you're like, oh wow, that's really interesting. We're going to go to space, but it's very risky, and for some people, maybe it's worth it. But
Well,
well, we'll see.
I think there's a lot of things to think through on this. Like, think about the role of the pilots, right? Like, you're a Virgin Galactic pilot. So that means you're going into space, like, what, on a weekly basis?
I don't know.
So you're going into weightlessness. You're going in and out of weightlessness for 6 minutes. You're absorbing all of the radiation that occurs when you start to get out of the Earth's protected atmosphere
Uh-huh.
for 6 minute increments. And if you're doing that for a year, I think it's really, really hard to know what the health consequences are going to be for pilots and crew that are working on these flights.
That's true. And honestly, like maybe they only do one every 6 months and they have a whole ton of pilots and they rotate, or maybe they're
We
going to
know
make it
that
autonomous eventually. I have
we
no
know that's
idea.
not how, like, that's just completely unrealistic. If you have somebody that's qualified to do that, this is just the way the business works. If that somebody if that's their value, then you leverage that value. It
Yeah.
makes no economic business sense to have a crew member that's capable of being on this flight that can brings in millions of dollars of revenue every time that it flies, and you're paying somebody a commensurate value in order to crew that flight, but you're only using them once a month. I mean, the cost in hiring enough people to rotate them properly is
Yeah.
just seems astronomical for what you're getting back.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, and there's these like kind of these 3 or 4 areas that you have to consider when building out this industry. So the first one is safety, and we've been talking about that. And
Mm-hmm.
you made us told me a stat the other day, which I thought was really interesting, is you were kind of crunching the numbers on our number of people that have been to space and all that kind of stuff. And what did you say? You said there's about did you say 7 deaths out of every 100 people who have made it to space?
Yeah, so I can't fully validate this, which is why I didn't bring it up front.
Yeah.
But as close as I'm able to calculate, and I'm just using American numbers because the numbers from other countries might not be the most accurate,
Yeah.
especially because a lot of the space flight stuff recently has been going out of like Russia and China and countries like that where they don't share
Yeah.
the information with us. But yeah, there's been 336 people who've gone to space. We've had about around 20 something to 30 people die either in space, on the way to space, or in training mishaps. So
Mhm.
that's for every 100 people who made it to space, there's about 7 deaths. So the other reason why I didn't bring it up right away is just because looking at it historically, that's been more heavily weighted towards a while back, and the deaths have kind of tapered off. Part of that is because a lot of the flights recently have been unmanned,
Yeah.
but it's still the real question of like, all right, well, what is the level of safety at this point? If we're taking somebody who's in their 50s and 60s and they have a desk job because they're a billionaire, or they're mostly just managing their finances, and we don't necessarily know what their health is, are they going to die on some training exercise before they even leave the ground? I don't know. It's a real interesting question, and it's something that they're going to have to address and figure something out.
The one thing I did read was that I think Sir Richard Branson is going to be the first one on this flight, and I think he's
Hmm.
going this year.
Well, I mean, they did have a setback. Virgin Galactic did have a person die, I believe, on a test flight.
Yeah, like in
And
2013 or something, wasn't it?
yeah, so it's very real. And plus, keep in mind, Richard Branson is like he's like the prototypical thrill seeker billionaire, right? He's like
Yeah.
the based characters in movies around him of just like, oh, I'm super rich and I'm going to go skydiving and stuff. Like this isn't. That's not like the. I don't think he's representative of that cohort that much. So we'll see. I hope it does well. I think it'll be. I hope he's safe, but I don't know how much this generalizes to the rest of the public.
And what about the environmental impact? Right?
So I don't know for the suborbital flights, but
Yeah.
I was able to find this is on Digital Trends. We'll be posting a bunch of these links on Twitter. From what I've been able to see, each rocket launch is about 150 times the carbon footprint of a transatlantic flight. Not to mention the fact that because it's releasing a lot of the chemicals from the rocket launch up into the upper atmosphere, that has a detrimental impact on the ozone layer. And it hasn't been a problem yet, just because there isn't a substantial number of rocket launches. It's not like airline flights. But if it scales up because of space tourism, and when you have like 4 or 5 different companies doing like weekly launches on top of the existing launches that are occurring in order to maintain the space station and scientific missions and all these kinds of things, then it could become a real problem and can have a huge impact. Then you start adding on the suborbital flights, which I imagine is some order of magnitude more than just a normal flight. Until we have some kind of major advancement in just energy generation and rocket technology, then this is going to have a substantial economic impact for us.
Well, I know Elon did an interview a little while ago. I think it was a couple weeks ago, and he mentioned in there that they are looking into the fuel, like how the
Mm-hmm.
mixture of the fuel is done, and trying to develop new fuels that can. I don't know a ton about this stuff, but like basically better for the environment. And he said it's in the
Yeah.
works.
Well, I think the energy generation at some point, especially for the suborbital flights, I think that'll get there.
Uh huh.
I would love to see it happen for rocket launches. I think it's a huge challenge because the very nature of the concept of a rocket is it's got combustibility, right? And by that's nature, anything combustible is going to throw out carbon, whether it's a campfire or a rocket launch, it's just going to throw carbon. So I don't see a way around it unless they can come up with some other just fundamental approach to exiting the atmosphere.
I mean, I look at this and I go, are we just kind of being a little bit short-sighted in the sense that we got to these different technologies, these different capabilities, these different industries that emerge, they got to start somewhere, right? And maybe 50 years or 100 years from now, people will look back and go, oh yeah, look at that. So Richard Branson and Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos started this program, and eventually there ended up becoming the standard for travel, and that kind of stuff.
Well, the reality is, as a nature of our work, I think that it's like I said before, it's good that all this stuff is happening. It's good that they're adding to the knowledge of the world as far as how to do these things. And if SpaceX or Blue Origin or any of these companies can figure out more environmentally friendly or more energy efficient ways or more safe ways to accomplish space travel, then that's a win for everybody.
Yeah.
But the reality is, you and I, because of the nature of our work, we go to shows where people are announcing new technologies and new products. And for us, it's like, okay, cool. We were seeing this 10 years ago. Now it's making it to the market. So we're usually around 10 years ahead, I would say, what's available in the market with the stuff that we're working on. And I look at this and I'm like, this is much further out than the space that we live in. So that's, to me, I know people are hoping for 10 to 15 years out. I'm looking at it and I would say it's more like 30 to 50.
I don't know. I mean, this is an interesting one. It's also fun to talk about, right? Because it's just so quirky and like wow, how's this going to turn out? And I hope to see Sir Richard Branson go up and do his thing and come back, and everything works out great, and they kind of are able to kind of move forward and focus on this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I hope he stays safe for a variety
Yeah.
of reasons. Like, I don't want anything bad to happen to Richard Branson. And I think that if something did happen, it would be a colossal setback for the entire, not just for space, but also for aviation in general. I just keep thinking of that episode of Billions where the guy's going to space and then he's just rocket just explodes on the way. The billionaire in Billions who was trying to make it to space.
In the show. Yeah.
I remember being a kid and seeing the Challenger disaster, and that was a huge national trauma for everybody to get over.
Yeah. I mean, that I still think about that. I mean, I saw it live. Yeah, I think most people did. And it's like, ooh, we learned a lot from it for sure, but it was just, yeah, it was horrible.
Yeah. I just hope that everybody who's involved is behaving as responsibly as they can. And I don't know, sometimes in business that doesn't always happen. Sometimes people get carried away and they're not the most responsible sometimes.
Yeah. It's interesting too. The CEO of Virgin Galactic, I think it's Michael Colglazer. He's a former Disney executive that used to manage their parks.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if maybe there is something that we're missing here, meaning like, yes, they're talking about space tourism and that kind of stuff, but maybe there's a lot of other components here, like less risky components where you can educate the public and make it a fun and engaging experience, but you're not always, it's not just about going to space. I don't know. But to bring
Yeah.
someone in like him makes me think they're really, kind of thinking of this from that Disney slash entertainment perspective.
Hmm.
And there might
Yeah.
be something else here.
Disney is very focused on the experience of the user, and whether they're in the parks, whether in their resorts, wherever they are. But at the same time, Disneyland doesn't take you to the Temple of Doom on the Indiana Jones ride. It kind of brings the Temple of Doom to you. So now, if you're on a Disney cruise, that might be a bit of a different experience. But
Yeah.
those are some of the things. Disney's they've had some high profile accidents happen, but that's always going to happen. But they always focus on safety within their experiences. So
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that. Like I'm keeping an eye on this. I wouldn't be surprised if there was some kind of intermediate experience that involves like people getting an idealized element of kind of space exploration, like things you can do with simulators and VR these days
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
that can be fantastic. And you can even use content and visual and audio assets that are gained on actual space flights. It's to me, it's like, all right, well, this is risky, so we'll see what happens, and I hope that it
Yeah.
works out well. But like, it's a little nail biting for me. I don't want to see anybody get hurt.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that came to mind is that maybe you have like 10% of the people who are interested actually end up going and doing suborbital space, but maybe
Hmm.
like 80% of the people who are interested go through NASA training. Like maybe it's like, oh, you want to go through the training of what it's like to be an astronaut and get your certified astronaut, badge or something like that. And people
Yeah,
just want to go through the training. They want to get on the centrifuge. They want to put on the uniform. They want to get in the
yeah,
airplane and fly around, but maybe not exit, maybe not go all the way into orbit, or like there might be a lot of other like opportunities here that are pretty fun and amazing for
yeah.
kids and everyone else to get
Could be.
interested in space.
So, well, I have a question for you, Brian. So let's imagine that you have an outspoken, very powerful, very wealthy person, let's say like a Jack Ma or even an Elon Musk,
Uh-huh.
and they get ramped up and they pay for going through just the training,
Hmm.
and then they do an evaluation on them and they determine, right, well, you're just not a candidate for training because we find that there's this health situation that's going to make the training itself dangerous for you. What do you
Yeah.
think the company does? Do they just return their money? Does that billionaire just say, okay, well, you told me I couldn't do it, so I'm going to not do it? Do you think that
I
that's
I
how that would work?
personally think when you're paying $250,000 for 7 minutes of experience, I think they return the money. I think they itemize that $250,000, and a percentage of that is you going through training. And if you come out the other side of training after
No, I
having your
mean,
health,
well, I'm thinking in this scenario, we're talking about like they spent the $50 million deposit to
oh
get
yeah,
the
yeah,
training, go to suborbital space, and then they get in and they say, I'm sorry, wealthy billionaire who's never heard the word no in the past 20 years.
uh-huh.
But no, you can't even go through training because it's too dangerous for you because of your health.
Yeah,
Do you think that number one, they even tell them that because it means having to return millions and millions of dollars?
uh-huh.
And number two, do you think that that billionaire just accepts it?
Well, it doesn't matter what they think at that point, right? I actually think
Maybe.
that because it's all guided by the FAA and their regulation, I actually think that they would say, "Hey, this isn't right for you, and it can destroy our whole program if something happens to you, so you can't go." Like I really do. I think that because there's a heavy emphasis, the research I did, a heavy emphasis of safety coming from the FAA with like approvals and all this kind of stuff. I do think that they're going to have to say no to people who don't like being told no. And I think
Mm,
that's going to happen a lot. I think if you look at astronaut training, these are like people who are in like perfect health or have corrected issues. I think there's going to be a lot of people who might have the money to do it, and then they'll start going down the path and realize that they're not capable of doing it.
well, so number one, like I am worried that they're going to say, well, this is a lot of money. And then what is this person going to say? Are they going to try to destroy our company if we tell them no? that there's going to be a lot of
Yeah.
pressure for them to say like, oh, hey, we're going to bury this and then let the person on. This is the kind of thing that you find out like, it gets turned into a David Fincher movie or something after the fact of like, hey, this is what happened and this is why all these people died or something, right?
I don't know.
On the other side of it, even if they do practice, the proper guidance and they're not avoiding regulation and they're actually telling these people like, no, you can't do it. It's too unsafe for you. Does that mean that wealthy billionaire who does not take no for an answer is going to take some aggressive moves toward that company? Either whether it's just like aggressive tweets, or are they going to start buying up their supply chain, or like,
Who
are there
knows?
going to be consequences for telling somebody no?
Well, I will tell you this. If there's 5 potential companies that do this and you told them no, they have 4 others they can try as well. I think that's one part of it. I think the other part of it is that, except for Virgin Galactic, this is like a means to an end for these companies, right? They're
Mm-hmm.
not trying to make a ton of money helping billionaires go to space for the long term. They're just kind of looking at this as a funding source, is what it appears. I could be wrong, but like it appears as
Mm-hmm.
a funding source so they could do their bigger endeavors, like big contracts with NASA, going to Mars, colonizing the moon, all these things that,
Yeah.
building space bubbles that you can live in space. I think that's the primary goal. I think I'm a little more on the positive side of this, and I could see where you're seeing the potential downside of it, but both could be correct. I mean, who knows, right? This is
Yeah.
a new frontier. Like, this is crazy, and only time will tell. And we'll find out some of this year. That's the thing, is some of these companies are sending people up at the end of 2021. So we're going to have an answer to this, and we should come back and do a podcast. We should do a podcast live during the launch and just have our
Ah, man.
reactions to it.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I think a lot of this stuff is going to be, we're going to find out if there was any wrongdoing kind of after the fact, barring, a horrible, horrible accident, right? But the
Yeah,
reality is, if you look at where people have lost their life or been severely injured, quite a bit happens in training. So it's like, again, fingers crossed. I feel like if it's done right and it's done responsibly and it's done safely, that means taking their time with it and developing additional technologies above what's available now.
sure. Yeah, no, I agree with that. And that's kind of like talking about predictions as we kind of wrap this up. Is I agree with you. I think that this is kind of a stress test on the system, and there's going to be new technologies that are going to emerge for safety, for luxury, for all that kind of stuff. But I agree with you 100%. Like, this is a luxury experience for the foreseeable future, and I don't think we're going to see anything. I had said 15 years. For mainstream, I think you said more like 30 years. But it's fun to think about and it's fun to watch. But at the same time, it's very scary. This is something that we really haven't tried to do for the most part before. And now we have multiple companies racing to do it. And that
Yeah,
always worries me a little bit.
it does. Yeah. So one of my predictions is this is going to exist on some level. I think it is going to be kind of a very, very niche thing where some people do it. And it will be kind of like you said, just like a side offering next to, servicing the space station, running scientific missions, trying to get off world to the moon, to Mars, to meteorites and near Earth orbit kind of thing. One of my predictions, though, is that some company, and I don't know that it's going to be one of these major companies, it might be more of somebody else that we're not thinking of yet, is going to kind of have that Enron corner cutting, irresponsible approach, and we're either going to find out because somebody got hurt or
Mm-hmm.
because something went wrong. I think we're going to see some company, because they're struggling against the competition and there's this race going on, just behave irresponsibly, and it's going to be some negative consequences of it.
Well, there it is. Only time will tell, and we'll circle back and see how this all looks in the future. So I think that's a wrap for today. I want to thank everyone for listening. Also, a couple of announcements. We are on Twitter at the X Podcast #1. If you have a topic that you're interested in us talking about, I mean, there's literally hundreds of topics that Demetrius and I have on a list that we want to address over the coming years. Just send us a note. Also, Demetrius is dropping a lot of the links to different things that we talk about on the podcast, different sources that we use in order to gather information. We always try to be very clear that we don't have everything. We just do our best we can to kind of dig in and figure out what's going on and then come from the angle of user experience, which is where we come from. So thank you all again, and we will see you all next week.